Ubisoft announced in an earnings call that sales were slow, multiple projects had been cancelled. At the end of January, Microsoft announced that some 10,000 employees... Sadly, April also brought with it more layoffs. This time layoffs at dozens of publishers saw thousands of game makers lose their jobs. The most important, most shocking, and most disappointing news is that Bungie have commenced a round of layoffs. Earlier this week, Microsoft announced that it was shuttering 3 studios and merging another into ZeniMax Online.
20,000. That's the number of jobs lost in the gaming industry in the past 18 months. 20,000 livelihoods put at risk, not counting the families and loved ones of those let go who depend on them. 20,000 jobs in an industry that is notorious for often demanding the devs to relocate to different countries just so they can work on something they love and then be unceremoniously fired out of the blue. Quite sobering. At this point, we've heard plenty of voices from within the industry speak out against what's happening, yet the trend of unrelenting layoffs and studio closures doesn't show any signs of stopping. If anything, the pace at which these sad news are being announced keeps accelerating, the tragicomic ridiculousness of it making even me, a mere observer with no real skin in the game, scratch my head in disbelief. So what the fuck is going on then? Is it just capitalism bad, CEOs are retarded, shareholders are evil and we have to eat the rich? I mean, kind of, but also no matter how attractive that oversimplification sounds. To properly answer that question, we have to go back.
Where? Back to the future!
China has identified the cause of the mysterious new virus.
Coronavirus.
Coronavirus.
There are fears a rapidly spreading virus has reached Australia.
This is a rapidly emerging situation.
When COVID hit, it marked the end of a decade of prosperity and growth for pretty much every industry out there. I mean, naturally, with the whole world sitting in their homes, not much growth can be done. Unless... While everyone else was trying to figure out how to get their company through this shitstorm, with people locked up at their homes with nothing to do, it's no surprise there has been a significant bump in popularity of gaming. Now imagine for a moment you're a big shot executive of a huge publisher. With the rather immodest salary you have, there's a weight of expectation that you're a sharp businessman with great eye for how the market's gonna behave, right? So, naturally, you have to be aware that this incredible surge is strictly a short-run phenomenon. You have a great understanding that video games are goods with very elastic demand, where as soon as people's income goes down, which is after all inevitable now that COVID complicated everything, guess what kind of expenses are they going to cut? Will they buy less food? Yeah, I don't think so, and you as a smart cookie don't think so either. As the mature and intelligent person you are, you also clearly see no point in making rushed acquisitions, greenlighting an ungodly amount of new, preferably live service projects, and quickly hiring way too many new workers just because the spreadsheet from the last quarter has all the figures growing exponentially. No, you know better. You understand that there's no way you can keep up this pace of growth and know full well that the supply in the gaming industry is way too inelastic to respond to this new short-term boost in demand that will inevitably wear off. Obviously, all the projects you'd start working on now would be getting to consumers maybe 3 or 4 years later, where it would no longer be relevant and you'd have to cancel things, accept the sunk costs and let people go, as every board member would demand you to cut the expenditure. Fortunately, you're way too clever to fall for such thing, and that's by no small part thanks to the fact that you're well versed in predicting how the market is going to behave. For example, you know that from the Solo's growth model that there's something like a balanced growth trajectory that whether you like it or not, you're gonna converge to in the end. You naturally realize that just because your revenue has grown by 40% year on year, it's by no way sustainable to keep such growth figures or even exceed them. You also know that the balanced growth rate is by no small part affected by the productivity of labor, a variable that's quite predictably going to take a serious hit now that all your employees are working from home, and it's gonna take a while to figure out how to efficiently reorganize the teams. Plus, there's also the rather unpleasant reality of a new economical crisis on the horizon. You'd have to be an ignorant idiot to disregard any of this and still expect the numbers in your spreadsheet go up, right? Right? Well, guess what? Turns out that's exactly what they are. And thanks to great strategic decision making of our Russian friends, the one thing that might have helped those clueless CEOs to lessen the impact of their obvious mismanagement, the economic rejuvenation that is a natural occurrence after a crisis such as the COVID pandemic is resolved, well, it's not happening because the entire Western world is now feeling the impact of what's happening in Ukraine. But the sad state of the world's economy and the degree of Putin's evil stupidity are well beyond the scope of this video. What isn't though is a thing I hate with a burning passion: subscription services. Time has clearly proven that no matter how enticing it sounds to pay for things only when you need them instead of owning them, all it really achieves is an ever-growing gap between owners of the capital and the rest of the world. A shining example of this being the housing market. So I guess it's no surprise that the big corporations seem to be truly thrilled by this model, and for over a decade now they've been transforming the entertainment industry. We've seen it with TV streaming and we're seeing it in the video game space. But now comes the intriguing part. You see, these subscription services aren't actually all that great even for the companies. Basically, all the streaming giants are quite stingy when it comes to sharing actual numbers because turns out it just isn't all that profitable. I think the real breakthrough came when Netflix succeeded at persuading their shareholders that it's not really about the immediate profitability, but way more about the growth in subscriber numbers. Services like Netflix or Microsoft's Game Pass are, in its initial phase, a huge pit where you just throw money and pray it's not for naught. You have to build the library big and varied enough to attract as many users as possible, which is a lengthy and expensive process, and only at the very end, given you can keep up the growth of active users, you finally start to make some bank. An obscene amount of it. If, and this is a huge if, you can keep the curve going up. The reality of it is that you can't. Sooner or later it just plateaus. You kinda hit a point where everyone who's interested in what you offer is already on board, and those who aren't just can't really be bothered. By the way, in the description you'll find a link to a great article titled The Life and Death of Hollywood by Daniel Bessner. Great read, nicely highlights the shift in the business strategy of these streaming giants and how a little golden age of TV in the mid-2010s has slowly deteriorated into a corporate dystopia of perpetual risk minimization that's in direct conflict with the creative nature of the industry. Not unlike what we're seeing happen with games right now. Take a look at this video from 2018 where Ninja Theory, the studio behind Hellblade, announces they're joining Microsoft Studios.
Good afternoon. Welcome to E3 2017.
Nevertheless, they asked us what our goals and ambitions were as a studio in an ideal world. And so we said, we want to be free from the AAA machine and make games focused on the experience, not around monetization. We want to take bigger creative risks and create genre-defining games without the constant threat of annihilation. And above all, we want to protect our team, our culture and identity, because that, in essence, is Ninja Theory.
They said you can have all of that, and if you so choose, our marketing teams, support teams, research and technology groups are at your disposal to supercharge your efforts to do more of what you want to do and how you want to do it.
And compare it with the language of Matt Booty, the head of Xbox Game Studios, talking to the team in Double Fine Productions, developers of Psychonauts, a year later.
A lot of people have side creative things they do. They write children's books or play in bands or something, and they want to make sure that will be able to continue under Microsoft.
Where the moonlighting only really starts to be something that we even really need to have a conversation about is if you are making something that directly competes or conflicts with what happens here.
Because I've seen this happen to friends of mine who have released games, and this has happened, and then the company has gone after them, and they were like, even though they had a nice little handshake agreement, they still ended up having to pay that company.
So if you really want to go run a startup, quit and go run a startup. The reality is that once something is kind of in these walls, Double Fine owns it, right?
What Microsoft/Xbox essentially did over the years is they went on a wild spending spree, acquiring many incredible studios with great talent, with the sweet promise of them not interfering with the internal workings of the studios and only being there as an additional support. They have on multiple occasions proved that they do not stand by that promise. Instead of supporting and nurturing the studios and offering a creative independence, they have taken advantage of the pre-existing work those studios made prior to the acquisition and then set them on a weird trajectory with plenty of questionable decisions, such as tasking Arkane Austin, the pioneers of the immersive sim genre, with developing a live service multiplayer title for Game Pass. We all know how that went. Furthermore, with the closure of Tango Gameworks, they proved that they're totally unreliable when it comes to the business assessment they share. When, despite reporting Hi-Fi Rush, Tango's latest release, as a financial success and a shining example of what kind of games they want to make, they short-sightedly shut the studio down, severely damaging their ties to the Japanese market. The question is, are they purposefully reporting false information about the performance of their games, or, and I believe this is the case, is there an internal struggle to actually determine what the success is in this weird era where the company itself seems to be unsure of what their priorities are? Like, really, what are you doing here, Xbox? Selling consoles? Sure doesn't look that way. Unfucking the non-existential Game Pass growth? Or is it all just about Activision Blizzard now that 70 billions of cash were burned on that front? It's not just Microsoft though, we are seeing this shit everywhere. Whether it's Sony, Embracer Group, whatever the fuck they're called, and Friends. Take-Two shutting down Roll7. Take-Two, they're about to make $1 trillion next year with GTA 6. What the hell? Why would you shut that down? Across the board, all we're seeing are frantic and dumb strategies to make quarterly reports look better, with no real care about the people working in the industry and the long-term growth and stability of studios. And why? Just to hide how thoroughly most of these big companies shed the bed by doing literally all the wrong things these past few years. I can't fathom that I even have to spell this out, but this is a creative industry that makes entertainment. Creativity is not the best friend with risk aversion and predictability. Create an environment that supports it, not stifles it. Make art, not content. Man, I really wanted to end this on a different note, ideally in a less convoluted and depressing way, but honestly I'm a bit deflated and saddened by all this, so yeah, whatever. Maybe I was wrong, maybe we really ought to eat the rich.